Are you all ready to join me today in our trip to outer space?
Come along quietly or not.
I will talk to you of art. For there is nothing else. Some artists make a hook. Yes. Let you bite upon it.
Classy. And now, without further ado.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Planet Shivers Podcast. I am, and always will be, Albert Shivers, and I'm excited for today's episode. The guest on Planet Shivers today is Jaycie Cuprill, the exciting and insightful musician who spans from Pennsylvania to Virginia, and we cover that much ground in conversation, I gotta say. Before we get to Jaycie, though, I just want to fill you guys in on a little bit of what I've been up to. Last week was a bit up and down for me with some car trouble. I ended up missing the big show at King Coffee with Nate Marks, Rubik's Cube, Tony Viagra, and Joey Tepedino, and a bunch of other talented folks. I beat myself up on it for a couple of days. I don't like missing shows. Car trouble got in the way. It's all sorted out now and didn't get in the way of my Poconos Raceway weekend. I spent Saturday and Sunday at Poconos Raceway with a little stop in between on Saturday night at Mahoning Valley Speedway, which is a fantastic local track. The vibe isn't just about the cars going in circles, it's the whole county fair, carnival kind of vibe to it. That's a lot of fun. I definitely recommend checking out Mahoning Valley Speedway. Not that far away from the drive-in, if you're familiar with Mahoning Drive-In. With summer being here, I've been getting the bug, especially on these 90-degree days. I've been getting the bug to lock the door and jump back into some collage work. I've been secretly stockpiling most of the winter and the spring up in my attic, old magazines, new magazines, and calendars and stuff, all sorts of things to chop up for collages, so I'm excited to jump back into that. In closing, my art and the art of some other fantastic artists is now available at LizzieBordenShop.com. All sorts of artwork and tchotchkes dedicated to Lizzie Borden. My stuff is there, along with a lot of other cool stuff. July 3rd, there'll be an art festival right here in Strasbourg for their first Saturday. This will be my first time doing the festival, but I'm excited about it. It'll be outdoors, so come and say hello. And some of my new work will soon be on firstdibs.com. I'll let you all know about that. Find out more what's going on my Facebook, Albert Shivers, or on Instagram at Albert Shivers, and on Patreon, Albert Shivers Artist. And I am now accepting tips if you feel so inclined through Cash App using $Shivers Art. Now, that's enough of an ear beating from me. Let's get to my conversation with musician and songwriter Jaycie Cuprill. And you'll hear from me on the other side of the conversation.
Have you ever thought of changing your music?
No.
Changing your
Why
sound?
should you change music? Mozart didn't change. Bach didn't change.
Some people call it progressive, Louis.
Well, what is progressive? You tell me, because all we play is good music. We never did worry about styles. Ain't no such thing as styles in music. Ain't but two kind, good or bad. That's all. Now that progressive and all that jiu-jitsu music and all that, you can have it. I'm not interested, because I get my applause for playing good. And in language, a note's a note.
Do you think then that some of these people that play today spend too much time in worrying about fantastic pieces to play and forget the simplicity?
I'm not interested. If I buy a record, it suits my taste, got the beat and the tone and what I like, that's all. I ain't worried about the fellas, what they ain't doing. That ain't my position. I got a lot of my personal worries. So I go by my ear, what I hear. That's why I buy records.
All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Planet Shivers Podcast. I am Albert Shivers, and I'm excited to be joined today by musician Jaycie Cuprill. Thanks for doing the show.
I'm really excited to be here.
And you're fresh off the road.
Pretty much.
Are you road weary at all?
Not too bad. I've gotten used to the travel up. It's only about 5.5 hours, so usually I do it with one stop. But that's why I like to do it in the morning, because I can wake up, get a little bit of nighttime driving, a little bit of daytime driving, and then when I get up here, I can just feel it out. If I'm tired, it's nap time. If not, I have a whole day I can do things. Like come do a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And it was from Virginia. You came up.
Yes, right from Richmond.
Cool. So you're originally from around this way.
Yes. I lived in like the Kunkletown, Broadsville, West End area. Pretty much my whole life. Technically, I was born in Jersey, but 9 months really doesn't count. But yeah, for my whole life. So I was always in Stroudsburg, always like in the Valley, always in the Poconos. So this is home to me. Richmond is a little bit of culture shock.
Okay, gotcha. What made you move down to Richmond, Virginia?
So years ago, I was actually set to move to California to go to school out there. It was about 5 years ago. Took a trip out there, explored it, thought it was really cool, but could never actually got into the mindset that I could live there. Felt like it was a really cool place to visit. I have a really good friend out there, and the school was awesome. It was beautiful, but way more expensive than they had originally told me. So there was a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I came back, and my best friend who lived in Richmond, I called her and was like, hypothetically, I rent a car and come visit you. She goes, what? And I said, okay, I'm sorry. I've already rented a car and I'm going to come visit you. Is that okay? And she goes, yeah, that's fine. And so I went down to Richmond and explored and fell in love with it. So I've been there a couple more times. It was always a joke. Jayce, you should move down here. And this past year, I mean, everybody's world got turned on its head. So I kind of went, you know what, why not just kick it up a notch? So we found an apartment back in October and I moved down in January.
Gotcha. What's the music scene like down there?
It's really cool. There's a little bit of everything. Like it reminds me a little bit of here because it's very community driven, and it's still growing. I mean, the city itself is still growing. It's not a very big city, but there's so much expansion going on everywhere. It's cool because there's different pockets of different types of music you can find anywhere. You can find the more urban style. You can more find country feel. You can find more the rock and the metal and the punk, and there's a little bit of everything everywhere. And I feel like music communities in general are all kind of hitting the reset button because of what we all went through like this past year. So as things are reopening, as things are starting to, allow music and the arts to come back into their establishments and festivals and everything else, it's starting to re-blossom, I guess. So it's cool being there during that time. Gotcha. So it's been a lot of fun. It's a really cool scene.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. I've spoken to some other people who've been down there, and I've only heard good things. So yeah. So what got you started in music?
So I have to blame that one on technically my parents, because like I was always, my parents were always musically inclined when they were younger, and the whole like, well, I guess it transfers to the kids thing. And like I had a fake like a little guitar when I was a kid. I'll never forget. I wrote. It was a little fake guitar. But I probably had like 6 strings on it, but like it wasn't tuned. It was just plastic, whatever. And I used to beat the heck out of it. And I remember I would sing. I was probably like 6 years old or something, going, "I've got the mama blues," and just beating on this thing. And it wasn't until I was probably about 12 years old that my grandfather actually gave me my uncle's old guitar that was bought for him. It was like a knockoff Gibson SG from like a Sears and Roebuck catalog from the 70s. I still have it. It's nice. It doesn't work anymore. All the electronics are shot, but it hangs over my bed back in my apartment. But that kind of set me off. I started playing like, exploring the school bands where they make you play like a little recorder when you're a kid, and then when I got older, I wasn't really into guitar. I was more into like drums. Okay. So it wasn't until like I started moving away from the school thing that I started picking up the guitar more. And yeah, then I guess the rest is history after that. But my parents got me started on one little guitar when I was younger, and then my grandfather with my uncle's guitar probably when I was about 12 years old.
What kind of music were you listening to at the time?
Oh wow. I have to say this to my parents' credit because so my I tend to play now when I do like my cover songs and like my pub shows. A lot of like classic rock and country style stuff, a lot of southern rock, things of that nature. I'll do play like some more modern stuff, some poppy things, metal. You know, I even do like a blues version of an Eminem song.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've seen that. It came out good.
It's I
like it.
For that I usually get, oh, that was a really cool take on Eminem, or oh wow, that was a really vulgar blues song. But when I was younger, it was my parents and my grandfather. My parents would listen to a lot of classic rock. Bob Seger was a huge one. My mom is a huge Eagles fan. And my grandfather was just like classic country. So like you had good names are gonna drive me, like Clint Black and Alan Jackson and places and people like that. So a lot of the classic country, a lot of the classic rock, and which works out because like my bands and everything now, and even me playing solo, I'll break out some of these more classic songs that I guess a lot of people don't necessarily play because they're just, I guess, becoming dated. You know, 60s, 70s, 80s stuff is... Sometimes it feels like, oh yeah, the 80s were 20 years ago, and you're like, no, that was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So people will tell me like, oh wow, I didn't expect somebody to play that, and I go, well, my parents raised me right.
Yeah.
So it's more the older, I guess, older stuff, you could say it now.
Yeah, I feel like two names you mentioned is Clint Black and Alan Jackson. It's that era is in a weird bubble right now, where to my vision, it's not quite old enough to be like on the same pedestal as like Johnny Cash or Waylon Jennings would be in country, but it's old, but it's definitely not current music anymore.
Right.
So it hasn't totally shifted to classic. I think a lot of people have kind of aren't remembering those guys that were in that little section there. I would put Toby Keith in that same generation.
You'd put Toby Keith and Alan Jackson in the same one?
In the same generation.
But no, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think it's the same idea as like how the way people will talk about like Lead Belly when it comes to the blues, or like even Elvis if you want to go that route. Yeah. It's a generational the way things age. You know what I mean? I used to out of college I used to work for 99.9 The Hawk. Okay. And it used to make me laugh when I would hear like Counting Crows on 99.9 The Hawk, or like Goo Goo Dolls on. And I'm thinking, like, this is 99 The Hawk. This is a classic rock station. That stuff is 90s music, and I'm going, I'm not ready for this. So I think it's a generational like aging of the music, and I agree with what you're saying. Is Alan Jackson isn't quite like and Clint Black and artists like that. Even you could say Garth Brooks. They're not quite that golden age of country music, but they are starting to be considered classic because of, you know, as we're getting older. I mean, the kids nowadays probably don't even know who they are. Right,
and that's the thing. To you or I, it would be, oh, that's more current because we kind of grew up with
exactly. So we want to deny how old we are.
So you mentioned Lead Belly, and he watches every show.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
Do you listen to a lot of old blues?
A little bit. I got into it. I'm not very well versed at all. I got into it because, believe it or not, when I used to do carpentry, I used to talk to this one foreman we had about music every once in a while. We talked about a lot of things. And he'd brought up blues music, and we started talking about it. And one of the artists he had mentioned was an artist called Lead Belly. And so I started listening to it, and like, it was funny. It's horrible that I compare it to this, but my grandfather, bless his heart, was not a singer. Couldn't hold a tune in a bucket, and he would walk around and like, just to annoy people, which was hilarious. He would go, "My dog has fleas," and it was the most annoying thing in the world. But it was hilarious as a child hearing your grandfather sing this, and it was weird. It didn't sound anything like, it was just a weird feeling that listening to Lead Belly, that old, like almost crackly recordings, and that old school style of it, and the way the vocals are just warm because of the different recording styles they had. It made me reminiscent of those memories of my grandfather. And I don't know why, because it wasn't like my grandfather was singing blues or anything. Right. But so I started listening to it, and it just became, I listen to all types of music. I'm very like emotionally based when I listen to my music, and it's weird. The amount of sunlight that's coming through the clouds that day affects what I listen to. And just certain times I get in just kind of a blues mood, and like, you know, Lead Belly, or like even starting to venture into the more rock side of it, like Wilson Pickett and like stuff like that. It's a very cool style of music, and it's kind of a foundation for a lot of what most music later became.
Yeah. It is the beginnings of the DNA.
Oh yeah.
Of what then came after. Like there were just so many musicians back then who were being recorded, and I don't know if have you ever heard of Alan Lomax?
No, I don't.
Okay, that's fine. So he was a producer and a recorder. He wasn't a musician, but he would just pick up with like one other guy and a recording machine and just drive through the South. And if he saw a guy or a woman just sitting out on the porch with an instrument, he'd pull over and try to record them. And then he'd get word of mouth, oh, well, you should go see Fred down the road, because Fred plays a hell of a banjo. And then he'd go see Fred, and then Fred would tell him about two other people. And he just worked his way across, and he found Muddy Waters. He found a lot of musicians who ended up becoming a big deal.
Wow.
And getting them down on vinyl or some form or tape, and getting them out there, giving them a little bit of a leg up.
That's cool.
As an introduction.
And who was that again?
Alan Lomax.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, if you type into any like Google or YouTube like Alan Lomax recordings, they've made a bunch of comps and like playlists of all the things he's recorded. He also used to go to prisons and record the prison songs.
That's cool.
This is probably like maybe 4 years ago, Nicki Minaj did a song that had an Alan Lomax sample in it.
Really?
So now, I don't really listen to Nicki Minaj, but I was in a gas station up in Mount Pocono, and they're playing this song, and I'm with a friend, and I'm like, that's Rosie, that's the name of the song that she had sampled. I'm like, that's an old prison recording. I'm like, no, she wouldn't. And I'm telling you, that's what it is. And I had it on the computer, and I pulled it up. It blew my mind.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Because you seem very like versed, at least in like a lot of the older side, at least the roots of music and how it's kind of evolved. And I bring it up for a reason, but like you mentioned the whole Nicki Minaj sampling the song. Does that ever annoy you to hear like modern music sampling songs like that, or do you think it's a cool way to reinvent it, or like how do you feel about that? I'm kind of flipping the script.
No, that's fine. That's fine. There was a time when it would bug me.
Okay.
Now I love it because, and it hit me. If I can go into a quick story. New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, is when that script flipped for me.
Okay.
Because I'd watched the ball drop. I was with friends. The ball drops, and they do the song.
Is that Pop Up Circumstance? Or no, that's the graduation thing. It's Pop Up Circumstance.
But it's this. They always sing it. The first song of New Year's. And right after that, they play Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. Now, I'm a big old jazz fan. I like Armstrong's early work. I could do a whole podcast on that. So, What a Wonderful World, that song would get under my skin because it was all people knew of him.
Right.
And me knowing all this about him was like, there's more to him than that.
There's so much more.
He invented jazz. So, would have that chip on my shoulder. But I'm watching the ball drop. They start playing What a Wonderful World, and it hit me different to say that, wow, okay, maybe this is all people will remember of him, but damn it, he's still there.
Right.
You know, long dead.
Oh, yeah.
And still there. He's still in the culture. So that started me to have a new mindset. And when I hear a new artist sample something old, even if it doesn't get credit as a sample, which hopefully it does.
Right.
But even if it doesn't, I see it as, okay, that old stuff, it's still there somehow. It's still in the culture somehow. And I guess if I have any purpose, it's to politely point it out.
And I think that's a great take on it because, so the reason I brought it up, the connection to it is so growing up, my dad was a huge Santana fan.
Okay.
So I grew up listening to a lot of it. Like one of my first CDs I ever had was I think it was Santana's like Supernatural album, and so and Santana was obviously known for bringing out a lot of different artists and you know, like featuring them and everything. And there was one that he did, Maria Maria, which is a very popular song. A lot of people know it. Mm-hmm. And so I always loved that song. And then it was a couple years ago, I heard Rihanna sample the guitar portion of it and play it in her song. I forget what her song was, but I remember it coming on the radio. I was like, oh, I love this song. And then it wasn't Maria Maria. I was like, oh no. And but I had to, similar to what you were saying, kind of take a step back and go like, that's the beauty of music, is like, in a weird way, it kind of maybe not makes the person, but makes the idea of the person become immortal in a lot of ways. Yeah. Because you're taking something that was their art form, their creativity, something that was individual to them, and it transcends the standard like lifetime of just you create it and then you go away. It's a little bit different than that because of things like obviously radio play and streaming and CDs and the way that works, but also the way it influences other artists. Kind of like how we were talking about the blues. Yeah. It lays a foundation, whether it's been sampled or it's been gone to for interpretations, or it's kind of cool that it still grows and finds its place in time, even if it's kind of changing its original way. Yeah. So it's cool. I was curious about how you felt about that, because originally it annoyed the living heck out of me, but I since have been able to take a step back and appreciate. I guess it's reaffirming its importance over time.
Right. And I've developed with just about all arts a more like, for lack of a better term, like a macro view of things. Mm-hmm. Just a large view of things, considering, if we take music and look at it just as one thing over all the decades.
Right.
And the early traditions of music was always being passed.
Right.
So you can look at it that way too, and I've grown into that mindset of saying, okay, Rihanna's going to sample a Santana tune. Okay, well, she wouldn't sample something she didn't like, probably.
Right.
I mean, we could also argue, like, somebody put this to me with the Nicki Minaj tune. She's like, well, she may have never even heard that song. It could have been the producer.
True.
Okay, fine. It's the producer then. But yet, they're still playing it at the Exxon in Mount Poconos.
Exactly.
And a young Nicki Minaj fan, if out of 100, if one of them says, what is that? What is that from? And goes back and maybe they like it. I don't know. Like that, there's so much to explore. And I'm someone who likes to dig backwards.
That's awesome.
And see where things have come from. So when you look at it from my point, when you look at it from the big perspective, it's all just growing off of one another. Mm-hmm. And we're all kind of just borrowing a little bit here and a little bit there and applying it to whatever we have in us and are putting out there with our own twist. So it used to bug me. It doesn't anymore, though.
You've grown to appreciate the art that is within the art.
Yeah. Because it's a waste of time to be annoyed.
Oh, yeah.
And get angry over something, too. I learned that the hard way, too. So it's better off to just enjoy it.
That's cool.
So when you started first playing music, what was it that you were playing?
That's a hard question. Like, I was probably, when I first started, it was pretty much just noise. Okay. My parents, I sometimes joke because my parents, I don't know why they did this, but they bought me an amplifier before they bought me a tuner, which I'm sure they regret too.
Okay.
But it was probably like styled off a lot of the classic rock stuff that I was always listening to. When I first started learning guitar, it was a lot of power chords and a lot of your basic chord structures, like, which again, then I got away from it and I played drums on a band setting. Mm-hmm. But I always kind of found my way back to more of a classic rock structured style of music. And even when I got older and I started playing guitar more often, mm-hmm. a lot of the drumming and the percussiveness of the way I had learned music previously I beat the living heck out of my guitars when I play. People are like, why don't you play electric guitar? Like, you don't have to hit it so hard. I'm like, yeah, but there's a percussiveness in the acoustic wood.
Right.
So it was probably just like all derivative from a lot of that classic rock stuff.
Okay. When did you first start playing live? What was that like, playing in front of people?
Oh, wow. That was terrifying. Because, like, I'd always done music, but I'd never thought of it as something, like, it was weird. I always idolized, like, any performer or any, like, I was the kid who, like, when they ask you, what do you want to be when you're a kid? Well, my first thing I wanted to be was, like, a paleontologist. Like, I thought it was awesome to dig up dinosaur bones. And then I got older and I was like, I want to be a rock star paleontologist.
That was my first
Really?
dream job too, yeah.
That's awesome.
And all the kids and girls were like, what is that?
We were all as lame as Ross on Friends. But then I got older and I was like, I want to be a rock star. I still want to dig up dinosaur bones, but I want to be a rock star. But like my brain never like actualized the idea like, oh, that's always something you can do. And not to say that I am. I'm just saying that it, like the idea of performing never crossed my mind. And then as you grow up and, you know, I mean, when we're kids, we're horrible to each other. So, like, it was this, like, naturalized fear of the stage. Like, I had stage fright like I wouldn't believe. The idea of getting up in front of people was terrifying. And then but I would still play guitar, like, for friends. And, like, I'd bring my guitar to school and, like, stuff like that. But playing, like, a show or, like, like the little school events, never.
Right.
And then a friend of mine, they were doing, like, it wasn't a battle of the bands, but it was just like a musical showcase at the school. And a friend of mine was like, you should do it. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I ended up playing. And the crazy part was when I played, because of all the stage lights, I couldn't even see the audience. I was so blinded by the lights that like all my anxiety kind of went away because I couldn't see everyone. So the whole fear of everyone's looking at me, it didn't matter because I couldn't see them looking at me anymore.
Okay.
So I did that and like it subdued my stage fright, but I never did it again for years. Like that was in high school that I did it.
Okay.
It wasn't until I was about 24, 25. I had been dating someone at the time and I played guitar for her all the time and she was like, you should really like do an open mic or something. I was like, no. Right. But she kind of pushed and pushed and pushed and finally was like, fine, I'll go do one. And it was actually at Sarah Street. Was the first place I had ever gone out to an open mic, and I fell in love with it. Like I was like, this is amazing. The music, obviously, the ability to be on stage, it was electrifying. But also the people that you can kind of connect with. I've since always said that like music is kind of like, it's kind of a weird like alchemy because it's like it's neurological manipulation in a way because you're just creating vibrations, but you affect somebody, each person completely differently, and it's all like an emotional response. It could be, you know, traumatic, it could be enthusiastic, it could be euphoric, it could be, you know, horrible, it could be annoyance, it could be all, you know, millions and billions of different emotions, all from playing an instrument or drumming or clapping or playing it. It's crazy that music has that power. And I kind of got hooked on that. So it wasn't until I was about 24 or 25 that I like really was like, this is something that I like to do. But it was like an open mic thing. I would do it like maybe like 23, 24. And then it was probably when I was about 25, a guy I'm friends with, Brian Roeder, him and me had maybe played guitar like twice. It was just you play guitar, I play guitar. We sort of kind of know each other. Want to get together and jam? We did it maybe twice. Once at my house, once at his house. That was it.
Right.
I got a phone call from him on like a Tuesday night going, are you doing anything on Saturday? No. Well, I apparently have a show booked and I don't have a band anymore. So you want to play a show? I'd only been playing open mics for a couple years.
Right.
I'd never been really in a band before. Like I've been in bands, but we played in basements. And suddenly I was like, well, do you have anybody else involved? He goes, I think I have a drummer. Sure. Do we have music? He goes, no, we'll make it work. Played a 3-hour show. The crowd loved it. We played for an extra half hour. We had 22 songs that I think we knew. It was a lot of guitar solos. And that kind of reaffirmed this like weird little addiction that I got because I got to do something that brought me so much joy. Playing music and making noise and doing something that I loved, and I've always been kind of loud and a little bit brash. I mean, I'm kind of reserved and shy at first when I meet most people, but once like I open up, I'm kind of a bull in a china shop, and I got to do that through music, which I love.
Right.
But then I got to see its effect on people, and I always said it was kind of a symbiotic relationship. Is I'm having the time of my life, and like I can't stand still on stage. I don't like to sit. I jump around and run around, and so I'm having a great time, and I exhibit that physically. And then when I see a crowd get into it, or somebody tapping their hand, or tapping their feet, or clapping their hands, or nodding their head, or dancing, or whatever, I always said the biggest compliment is motion. Like if I can make you move, I'm doing my job. So if I see that, it makes me happier. I get more excited. I sing better. I perform better. I'm more active. It usually, is reciprocated because they get more into it, and it's cool that it's like symbiotic role of energy exchange between me and the audience. So it was something I kind of gotten addicted to. But if it hadn't been for doing like open mics when I was 23, and there's so many artists that I started playing guitar when I was 12, making music my whole life, but I never even considered performing in front of people until I was pushed out to do it on my early to mid 20s. So I'm glad I finally did, and it's been a roller coaster since. But yeah, I guess I was kind of a late bloomer in that concept.
Yeah, well, it seems like you definitely took to it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's the best. The joke of it is, I always said it's the most fun you can have with your clothes on, so I want to get booked at a nudist colony and see if I can't take it up a notch.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, one of the nudist colonies in the area gave my band their card and was like, hey, can we put you on our to call list just in case? And I was like, this is a dream come true.
All coming together.
It never actually happened. I was 100% down for it, but I was like, this was my running joke. So it's the best feeling in the world. It's hands down my favorite thing in the world. But yeah, it blows my mind that I never got started doing it younger because of how much I enjoy it.
Yeah, that's the case with a lot of folks. I don't think it's ever too late to get into anything. It's just a matter of how much your heart's in it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. And
sometimes, like I said, I mean, if it hadn't been for that previous past girlfriend, who knows when or if I would have ever made it to. Sometimes it takes that little push. I was like, fine, whatever, I'll do it, and I couldn't ever be more grateful because that's what got that little push. Just get up on stage, do your thing in an open mic, and I was like, this is where I need to be all the time. Right. So I love it. It's like I said, it is the best feeling in the world, and I'm lucky to get to do it as often as I do.
So has your music, does it play into or has it helped you through your transition at all? How much has music been a part of that?
Oh my, your life? It's probably so the thing about my transition is I'm lucky because the fact that I did it with music. I know I''ve spoken to tons of trans people and people who are not, and allies and everything else, and people of all walks of life, and I get this all the time, and I understand why they say it, but it's I think it's misdirected because it shouldn't come to me. I get told I was brave and it's amazing that I do this, and I'm like, yeah, I get it, but there's so many people trans individuals who are way worse situations. I was lucky that I had a medium like the arts and music to do it through, because I came out as trans right around the same time that I started performing. Okay. So over the last 7 years or so, people have watched me on stage in front of them slowly change and become the person that I am. And some people go, oh, well, isn't that nerve-wracking, being in that position? You're just out there, it's not and sometimes, yeah, it was. But again, I think I was lucky because I always had my bandmates. I've always played in bands or duos. I just recently, now that I moved, started dedicating to solo stuff. Obviously, I don't have my original bands and duos, but I've always played in some kind of a group setting. So I always had a team. I always had a support system. I always had my friends, and basically at this point my family, to support me in whatever. These were my brothers, or in case of Michaela, my sister. I've always had these people who they had my back no matter what. And if anyone ever questioned the way I looked, or the way I dressed, or the way I expressed myself, or whatever, at the end of the day, if I absolutely needed to, it could always be written off as like, she's a musician. Yeah, they're eccentric. They while out a little bit. For the longest time, people just thought that the 80s threw up on me. I had the big hair and I wore the freaking tight pants and the freaking... So I could always use the art form as kind of a security blanket. Whereas a lot of people who don't have... I think that's true to say across the board with arts, whether you're a painter or a photographer or, you know, any kind of a medium at which point you can use your creativity. I think it helps people deal with things like this, like being trans or anything in the LGBTQIA like community. So like if it wasn't for that, I don't know how I would have done it, because it's always been kind of one and the same. It's as time grew, like I kind of became, I guess, an advocate for the community because I was always so open and so visible. But it's definitely like I said, the two have always gone hand in hand. It's affected some of the music that I've written. The first song that I ever wrote is a song called "Time for a Change," which I've had people over the years. It was the first song that I ever introduced to my band, and it just kind of it went on fire. Like people would come to shows and they would request the song, but it was always fun because everybody had a different definition of what the song meant. It was either political, or it was like a family-oriented thing, or it was like, you know, a life struggle, or it was something. It was time for a change. And there was only like ever like one, or the number's grown now, but at the time there's only like one or two people who were able to go, is this about? And I'm like, yeah, it is. Right. And so it's always kind of bled through into music. Some ways a little bit more like obvious. Other times it's more on the back burner. But like I said, it's my art and my transition have always kind of played off of each other. They found strength from each other. Songwriting, my creativity, when you're reinventing who you are in a kind of an abstract and not generally accepted way, it makes your brain kind of think outside the box, which is great for any kind of level of art and creativity. Whereas on the flip side, my music also gave me a bit of a safe space and a sense of community that I was always able to find. Like if it wasn't, especially this area is kind of, I think, special for music community because it's still growing and there's so much different style coming out of it. I know that there's great open mics in the area that I frequented all the time when I was here, and it was always cool to see the different little, but it's still growing and still like evolving. And I was lucky to be a part of that because it gave me an extended kind of creativity of family. And it always came back, and I never felt unsafe. I never felt disliked or unaccepted, and it was because of this awesomely strong sense of community within the music community in this area. So with my whole transition and everything with that, like, they go hand in hand. I could not have had one without the other.
Gotcha. Was it a freeing feeling to be going through that and also having the outlet of being on stage?
Oh, absolutely. Because it, like I said, I was able to explore early on. I was able to explore just like the way I would dress and like different gender expressions in that way. On stage with my band, and at the end of the day, if something wasn't, I mean, not that anything was ever not accepted, but if I was uncomfortable with something or somebody else, like, it could always just be written off as another form of creative expression. Musician being an artist, being eccentric and being creative in the way they are. So it, like I said, it opened up, it made it like how you said, it was very stress-free. It was almost like a little protective bubble of being able to explore myself and having, like I said, the safety net of, well, it isn't that she's trying to figure out her gender, it's that, well, she's just eccentric and a musician, and that's what they do. They're all weird. Right. So it definitely made it a lot easier to kind of explore myself and figure it out because, like I said, at the end of the day, it was just an art form.
Right.
Sunday at at New York National Speedway, the grand opening of the 1967 season. See in wheel-to-wheel competition, the 1967 390 cubic inch Ford Mustang Fastback, the 1967 396 cubic inch Chevrolet Camaro, the 1967 383 cubic inch Plymouth Barracuda, the 1967 400 cubic inch Firebird 400, the 1967 440 cubic inch Dodge Magnum R&T, plus gas and fuel dragsters at speeds up to 190 miles an hour at National Speedway, the big track in New York. Take the Long Island Expressway or Southern State Parkway to Sunrise Highway, Center Moriches, exit 56. Children under 12 free, unlimited free parking. Racing begins at 2 p.m. Sunday at New York National Speedway.
How much of your music now is original as opposed to covers? Are you writing more recently?
Yes. I don't write a lot. I mean, I do write a lot. Let me phrase that. I have stacks and books, and like I feel like if you're a musician, especially a performing one, everybody's got a stack of binders and a stack of paper, and usually they're half torn up, and there's a footprint on a couple pages, and like they're half songs. But so I'm constantly writing. Putting together a finished song that I play out, that takes a little bit, because I'm kind of picky about what songs that I'll write to perform, because that's people have told me over the years, like, oh, you should become a songwriter. There's good money in it if you can hit all you need is one hit. All you need is one, and there's truth in that. But I'm also
a lot easier said than
it
accomplished.
It is, and I'm very selfish with my music. I have a hard time conceptualizing somebody else performing something I wrote, because I obviously write them for me, for my performance, for my style. It's a weird thought to think of somebody else in Manitoba, New Mexico. I don't think that's a real place, but just performing it's something that I'm sure I'll eventually get there, and I'll wish I had done it sooner. But I have been writing more. The fact that I've completely changed my location and cities and everything else, and everything I've gone through, it's given me a nice little bag of thoughts and ideas to pull from. I actually just finished a song, probably about a week or so ago. It wasn't even related to anything trans or anything. It's silly. I want to write a song about hooking up. And so I wrote this whole, it's got 3 different parts to stories of just people going out and be, interactive. And I think it was kind of drawn on the fact that, this whole last year we were so isolated from each other. And it's such a generalized mindset of I just want to go out and see people again. So I wanted to write a fun little song, about kind of just going out and being a little bit free with yourself. But, it's definitely something that, I've enjoyed. But as far as my live shows, I do play a lot of covers. I also understand that as a performing, bar and pub and cidery, there's a lot of cideries and breweries and distilleries down there. You have to pander to the crowd a little bit. So you want to play stuff that they're going to enjoy, they're going to tap their feet to, and everything else. And I consider myself a little bit high energy. I definitely don't play stuff that people can nap to. I'm a little loud. But with that, I've also gotten the confidence, and I guess, depending on which way you look at it, you could say the selfishness of I play a lot of original music. If I play a 3-hour show, I'd say I'm probably playing at least 45 minutes of original music in that show. Spaced out, kind of thrown in there. I do a lot of stuff where I'll use an original song and piggyback it off of a cover. So that, it kind of helps people remember the music that I write, because they can, you did Every Rose Has a Thorn, but you combined it with Time for a Change. That was kind of cool. They remember the song that way. But it also gives me the chance to kind of also test my music out. I was in the studio starting a solo album last year. Obviously, the pandemic screwed all that up, and I wasn't really vibing with the studio as much as I thought I would. It was my first time in there, all the glitz and the glamour of being in an actual studio setting. It was a little overwhelming, and I kind of ran with it, and then kind of fell out of love with that setting. So I've been working on getting back in to start doing a little bit more original work and getting that out there. But over the last year or two, my original music has been played a lot more as far as when I go out and perform. And I like that way because, I mean, as any artist, you want to play your music regardless, but obviously when you're the style of artist that I am, you got to kind of make the crowd happy. So Summer of '69 gets played, and so...
There's nothing wrong with that either, you know? From the point of view of someone who does not write music, when you're writing an original piece, you personally, do you start off with the music, or does a lyric come to you that you'll put music to?
I love this question. Because I've been asked it a couple times, and I love this question because I think some artists are like music first. Like my guitarist Brian Roeder. He's a musician. He can play a lot of different instruments, but he's also an incredibly good guitarist. So like a lot of the times where we'll sit down or he's showed me original pieces he put together, it's always guitar first. Whereas like I have certain friends that they're more poets. So the artistry always came from the words first, and then the music kind of flowed to match the tone. For me, it's always been a bounce back and forth. I was always that really annoying kid in like middle school where the teacher would be like, okay, students, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to do poetry. And the whole class going, oh, God. And I'm sitting in the back going, yes, I can't wait. And they're going, if you shut up, she might do this in 5 days. Don't make this go on. I'm like, I hope it's 2 months worth. So I was always a poet first. But because of the fact that I was always, like I was a drummer first when I was, as far as a musical student, I learned to really appreciate like the physicality of percussiveness, like the way it kind of hits your body. Like if somebody puts a subwoofer in their car, you feel that vibration. You know what I mean? If when somebody turns the music up, you feel it in your body. That's why I like the acoustic guitar. Electric guitars are great, but it's more of like an auditory thing versus like an acoustic instrument where it's more of a physical like feeling of the music. So that's why I kind of bounce back and forth, because sometimes I'll sit around and I'll start, messing around with a little riff or, certain chord progressions, and just the feeling that the music will give me will kind of evoke the words afterwards. But sometimes, like I said, I'm always writing, I'm always doodling. Sometimes I sit down and I'll start piecing together these words and these thoughts, and I'll let that guide what kind of tonality the music wants to say. So I always kind of bounce back and forth. That's why I like that question, is because a lot of musicians fall one side or the other, and I've always gone back and forth. The last 2 songs that I've written, It's One of Those Nights is one of them, and Your Love is another one. They were both lyric first.
Okay.
I had a general concept of like, this is what I want to write about. Then it just kind of worked. The words came, music kind of followed based on the style I wanted to. But that's just, it's not always the way it works. I've always kind of gone back and forth.
Gotcha. So what are you listening to now? What's some stuff you're listening to now?
Like I said, I'm always going to be a classic rock head. I always go back, like I said, Bob Seger. I'm an Eagles fan. I like a lot of the old hair metal and like the arena rock stuff. It was always this big energetic vibe, which I kind of translate to into my music. I like using as much energy as I can to make other people feel it. If I can make you smile, I go up to people after shows all the time and I'll be like, I want to thank you because whether you realize it or not, your head was tapping and it made me so happy. It's I always listen to that, but also like certain like different like it really everything. But I will say this, specifically some things that I've tried to get into more because I think it's beneficial from an artist standpoint and from a community standpoint, is getting more into artists that are local to your area. Artists that maybe have never cut a record, they're just going out, and especially their original works, because it's raw creativity. It's people, it's unpolished, it's not influenced by a producer or somebody in a studio or like a crowd reaction. That's why I like open mic so much. I've always been a proponent for them. I think they're like the little dysfunctional family reunions for musicians and artists in general, because it's where you go to try out new material. It's where you go to find out if the stage is right for you. It's where you go to meet new musical people and collaborate, and especially for like local original music. you get to, and sometimes it's just not your thing. Sometimes it just doesn't feel right or sound good, or, oh, that was a little off. That's the whole point. And I think there's a beauty in mistakes. It's where I think some of the best art comes from, whether you're a painter or a poet or a musician.
Yeah.
So I think immersing myself in more of a local music scene is something that I'm still doing. I'm still getting better at. But also that's something that I've tried to listen and be more in tune with. I listen to everything that's on the radio. I try to dive into stuff a little bit more. I said classic rock, country I've always been a fan of. I think it's a good storytelling medium. Where we grew up, or at least where I grew up and everything, like it's a little bit more humbled music versus some of the glitz and the glam of a lot of hip hop nowadays, or like some of the heaviness that comes with a lot of rock. Though I do enjoy myself some good solid crunchy rock. Give me some Shine Down, give me Hailstorm, Theory of a Dead Man. Something that makes me want to be like, okay, I just got off of work and I need to drive faster than I should. I need to get to where I gotta go. Like, so I listen to everything. It's usually it's mood based. It's how much sun is coming through the sky. But I've been trying my best to, as far as music that I listen to, get in touch with, and now that I have a whole new community in Richmond, get in touch with that, like that very base, homegrown original music. You can listen to a million things out on your Spotify or Pandora or the radio, but I think to appreciate the creativity, it's good to see what music is around your specific area and what you have access to see live. I think it's a good place to grow your appreciation of music.
Gotcha. What are some projects and shows you got coming up? What are you working on now?
So I've been booking pretty good down in Virginia. Doing pretty good through the end of July. I'm working on a couple things near the end of that. I said I'm trying to get back into possibly a studio setting because it was fun, and it was a very good learning experience because it was a whole new avenue that I'd never explored before. So I'm eager to go back and explore that, but also be a little more hands-on. I lost a lot of my control on my last attempt. And when I sat back at the end, I went, it's great, but it wasn't me. I'd given up a lot of the creative control on a lot of my music, and when you're a solo artist, who attempts to do a full production, there's a lot of other hands in the pot. And when you look at the final project, you're like, that's just it's not where it was in my head. So I wanted to get back in the studio, take a smaller step on it, do some acoustic works to get my sound right, and then grow it from there. I said, working on booking as much as I can down in Virginia. I've been playing, luckily, I've been blessed that I've been playing almost weekly down there, sometimes 2 times a week. Really a good reception on my music and my sound down there. I still usually come back up to Pennsylvania, usually about once a month, to play a couple shows up here. I still perform with an incredible good singer, Michaela Marie. I still play with my band, the Bandana Brothers, from time to time. So it's pretty much just keep trucking. I was very lucky last year to play as much as I did. There was a lot of artists that could not play at all. I played like 92 shows last year.
Nice.
That wasn't the case all around. No. So then I up and rooted myself and went to a whole new city. So obviously I'm not going to have that same year, but it's almost like a reignition of the fire. It's like now I'm taking a step back. I went from being a medium-sized trout in a decent-sized lake here to a guppy in an ocean down there. So it's kind of like a little reignition of the passion, is going, okay, now I have to kind of start over. Like, I did okay up there. I was able to, become part of a bigger community and have my foot in so many different projects and everything. And now that's kind of the goal down there, is just regrow the music that I know that I can do, but also like let it evolve and see where it goes in a kind of a new surrounding. So it's pretty much just kind of always been the thing, is just play as much as I can.
Yeah, I think with any art, it's just a matter of doing it as often as you can.
Exactly.
That whole 10,000 hours theory that everybody has beaten me over the head with over the years.
Love it, alle singen, zo'n stem is klingen. Het is tijd geluksters, restaurant en caterers. Is de pargenigen, kent dit alles kriegen. De galmata, mi mei, love it, alle singen, zo'n stem is klingen. Het is tijd geluksters, restaurant en caterers. Essen nou de beste, service nou de beste. De galmata.
I mean, I love the old mill, but I mean that open mic in specific.
Yeah, I've never seen open mic like it.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
I like Sarah Street. For me, like I said, I've hosted open mics. At one point in time, a quick backstory.
Sure.
I didn't mean to cut you off, by the way.
No. Go.
So 2019, early 2019, I got a DUI. My dog died. I was an asshole, and I drank, and I got a DUI. Whatever. I usually don't drink, but my dog's dead, and I was sad.
Yeah.
So I got the DUI. I got sentenced in November of 2019.
Okay.
It was my second. I've got the stupid interlock in the truck. And so I was going to be under house arrest for all of December. I had gone to... I played probably at that point like 2 or 3 shows a week. I frequented all the open mics. You could tell me a day of the week and I knew probably at least 2 or 3. I hosted one on Mondays. The only reason why was because there was nothing on Mondays. So I was like, we need one. And our slogan was make Mondays suck less. So there was one on Mondays and everything else. And then for 30 days I couldn't do that. I wasn't allowed to leave the house. So I started this page on Facebook called Rising Tide Music. And it was a promotions page. I told all of the artists...
Sorry to stop you. Is this page still exist? Do you still have it going?
It's still up. It's inactive now because it was specific for this area. I can't do that justice living 300 miles away.
Understood.
But at the time, being so avid in the music scene around here, like I knew so many artists. I went to open mics Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday play show, Saturday play show, Sunday there was an open mic. I was always doing something. I'm on house arrest. I can't do that. So I'll never forget. I was at Sarah Street, hanging out with some friends, and I was like, I wish I could do something to like still be a part of the community. And it was I don't remember what set it off in my head, but I was like, you know what? I have an idea. And then that night, I sent out a video and a message to all of the artists that I could get in contact with.
Right.
And I said, send me your schedules. Send me your schedules for the next 30 days. And so what I did was every single day, I put out just a little poster. I took my little photo editing program and I put together a little poster of all of the artists, what time they were playing, what location. It was daily. Every single day there was a new poster. And then at the bottom, if there was open mics, where they were located, what time, who ran it. And after 30 days, I was like, well, I figured out how to do it. And I was like, okay, I'm good. And it was supposed to only last 30 days, but it started to amass a little bit of a following. Word of mouth was a big thing. And people actually were very receptive of the idea. People were using it. I actually was getting reached out to by venues saying, hey, do you know an artist that I need somebody to cover Saturday night? I knew all of the artists. So then the Facebook, the separate Facebook page outside of my personal page came along. Rising Tide became the name. And the concept was because, as we talked when I was out in California, one of the days we were out in like their version of Little Italy.
Okay.
And there was a big like seascape. Somebody had graffitied on the wall. And it was this big like ocean with a bunch of ships, and it said, a rising tide lifts all ships. And my interpretation of that, being such, so involved in music, was like, and I think it's also bigger to all artists, but specifically to the music community, I went, as musicians, we're individual ships.
Right.
We're all out on our own little oceans and journeys and trying to navigate these crazy waters of music, however we interpret it. Let's be more than that. Let's raise each other up. Let's promote each other. And that's what the concept was like. I was able to design this poster. It was, in the end, it usually took me between an hour to 2 hours every single day. Saturdays, Sundays, maybe a little bit longer if there was 20 or 25 shows.
Right.
Because I took pride in it. I took a lot of, and I did my best to make it visually appealing and everything else. But I wanted to create something that seemed interesting, seemed special enough that like people were comfortable and excited to be on it.
Right.
And on top of that, So hypothetically, you're an artist. I put you on the list. Right. You see it. It looks like this whatever. It's something special. You're on a list. Right. You share it because you're letting. Hey, the Rising Tide list is out. I'm going to be here. You've not just shared yourself and made it seem like there's a piece of content you were included in, but you've also shared all the other artists on that list. Right. So you yourself, promoting yourself through my work, have also then promoted all of the artists around your area. That was one thing. On top of that, other artists could use that list and go, well, you're playing at the Hideaway, and you're playing at the Happy Hour Grill, and you're playing at Shawnee, and you're maybe places people had never heard of. So then they can contact those venues and say, hey, I heard you do live music. I was wondering if I could be on your list. Yeah. People who weren't musicians could then use it. Was like a TV guide. Every day they got a list going, hey, I've never been out to Renegade Winery. They've got an artist from 4 till 6. Right. You want to go out and get some wine, maybe charcuterie, and it gave them the opportunity to see where the music was at. And the fact that it kind of grew the community and gave everyone a focal point to find the music, to grow the music, to promote the music. That was the concept, was the Rising Tide music. Don't be just ships. Be more. Be the tide. And that was always the little handle, was be the tide. So I started that, and it was another example of like how I was so involved in music as much as I possibly could be here. And I think we jumped off because we were talking about the Sarah Street open mic. But it was something that like it grew, and I did it every single day. It was December 6th of 2019 is when I started it. I actually made an announcement and a final post on December 6th, 2020, 1 year to the day later, announcing that the page would become inactive because, again, if I was moving, I couldn't do it justice. And I had people offering to take it over. But again, I think it was a little bit of a selfishness and a little bit of wanting to maintain a sense of purity with it, because it was my baby, it was my concept, and people were like, oh, you can get venues offered to pay me to guarantee their shows on there. Right. I always turned them down. I had artists offering to pay me too. Can you put me near the top? Or can you make my show a little bigger? I always turned them down because it was never about me. Yeah. I usually never mentioned my name. I never showed my face. I probably showed my face like 3 times on the page ever, just to like a little update video, what's going on. But I wanted to keep it so outside of focusing on me, because the idea was everyone as an artist, everyone's on equal territory. That way, it wasn't like, okay, we're all on different levels anyways. We're all trying to reach different heights, and we all have different skill sets. Some are better at this, it wasn't about that. It was just simply saying we're all musicians, we're all artists here. Right. If we can use something, one central focus point that brings us all up. Right. It was never discriminatory. It never said, oh, well, you've only been playing for a year. Get, book some more shows. No. You can be booking your first show ever. I don't care. You could be, playing a straight acoustic show with no speakers. I don't care. It wasn't about that. It was simply saying if you're a local artist. And I covered mostly Stroudsburg, Poconos area, and then I reached into the valley a little bit when I could. Okay. But like I said, the whole idea was just to take everybody up a notch, to give everybody, if you were viewers, you had a place to find the music. If you were an artist, you had a place to find venues and to promote yourself. Like, it was something I was very, very proud of. And when I finally ended up having to bring it to an end, there was a lot of positive feedback from the community. People were a little upset that it wasn't going to continue, because and on top of that, I met so many people and venues and was able to connect with so many people because I never made it about me, because I kept myself so separate. When it would come up, oh, you're Rising Tide music, you're the yeah, that's incredible. I watch that every day. Like it was very humbling to see the project grow without me, without needing a person behind it, because it wasn't about me pushing it. It was about what the community was able to indirectly create for themselves. I just got to be the curator, is basically. So it was something really cool that I got to put together. So I'm not sure how I got onto talking about that, but
Ogo Pub. and you guys blew the roof off of the fucking place. Like, you really did. To the point where, not that, I mean, I had no expectations of anybody. I take as it comes. But yeah, like, you guys blew that place away.
I appreciate that. Like, I think that night, I mean, me and Michaela have been in a duo for, I want to say almost 2 years.
Okay.
And I will say, playing with her is the most fun I think I've ever had, because we're two very similarly weird and just silly people.
You can see the chemistry.
It's like nothing I've ever experienced before. The drummer who is usually there is one of my best friends, Tyrone Bradley.
Okay.
He's the drummer of my band. Again, he's one of my best friends. He is just energetic. He's loudmouth. He's a big personality, and that's another thing that's always bled through his music. And it's been fun to watch him grow from what could have been considered just like a pocket drummer when we started the band. He could play a rhythm. He could fill the space when necessary. That's what he did. And he's grown, and his creativity has grown over the last 6 years. And I've been lucky to be along for that like growth of a ride with him in music. And we've done duo shows more times than I can count. So we would also do like this little trio, me, Michaela, and Tyrone, called Acoustic Deviants.
Okay.
Acoustic Deviants was always my title for like my solo stuff. Because the idea, me and Tyrone had talked about it once before. We were on our way to play a wedding show in New York, and I said, the way we play, the way that we create the desire to have a good time because of music. And when we go and interact with people, it makes people feel kind of almost special. Oh, we get to talk to the band. And I said, we're motivation for deviants. Because people want to take a step outside of their usual norm, because they're like, okay, this is interesting, this is exciting, whether it's the interaction with us or just the music we create. So I created this concept of Acoustic Deviants that was like my quote-unquote like personal brand. So we would do that as a trio setting. And then Brian, my lead guitarist, Kenny, my bassist, both incredible musicians. I wish they would have been there that night. But it was fun because Michaela had never gone to the Old Mill Pub, and I think she rarely goes to open mics, if ever. So it was fun to take her to a setting that she was unfamiliar with, and then place her in such a high energy and creatively driven setting. And then you add in all the pieces from Nick D'Souza's band and different people like that. I'm glad that it was so well received, because from my perspective, from the performing artist perspective, it was so much fun. I plan on going again this Tuesday, and I'll probably be at Josie Porter on Wednesday as well. Because like it's just the open mic scene in general. I think it's a good place for just creativity. I think it's a good place. It's homegrown. It's organic. It grows within people, and I think it's a good place to share it before it gets tainted by the stage or the sound room or just the overall production of it. Yeah, it makes it beautiful and shiny and sparkly and all that. But I think there's something magical about that, and I think Old Mill Pub is a perfect example of it, because you get all of these artists. Brother Bear is such a good example where he just jumps up with anybody, and the music will tailor to him. He'll tailor his style to the music, and it's a perfect example of how creativity is always evolving. It's always growing. It's always adapting, and I think as people we can learn a lot from that process. So that's awesome that you go and you experience it, because like I said, it's a special place to me. So it's awesome that it's been such a cool experience for you.
Yeah, no, I think again, like it's just talking in terms of one hand washing the other. Going there, meeting people. I've gotten opportunities for my art to be places. I've gotten opportunities for guests to be on this show and help grow the show as you guys get to promote what you're doing. So the community, it's happening, and I hope it continues to go in the right direction and grow.
I mean, it's a good spot, and I'm glad to see that's working for you, because it's that bleed over of artistry that I was talking about. It's a cool, like, almost it's our version of like a dysfunctional networking event, because you can meet new people and explore and exchange ideas, and it's just all while doing it while having a beer. Like it's an awesome situation.
If my wheel comes off and I hit the fence real hard, I get to whack every damn one of you with a hammer. Is that a deal?
Who does that sound like?
Y'all need some incentive to keep my tires on, obviously.
I think what the artist is trying to say, or that's what this means to me, it takes it one step further. And that's what I think it's cool, because that's what it looks like. I mean, I'm just being...
Yeah, that's fine.
Like,
no, I enjoy hearing people's perspectives on it.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Most of my art, like, I'm inspired by a handful of other artists, mainly cartoonists, Bakshi, Robert Crumb, cartoonists of, like, the 20s and 30s, because you go through, like, an old magazine, that was, like, art was so much more functional in society back then.
Agreed.
Because all the ads were hand-done art. Mm-hmm. Everything was hand-done. I have had a hard time swallowing Photoshop and digital art. I try not to get too mouthy about it, because I can get real mouthy.
Right.
I don't want to put anybody else down. I prefer to work by hand, and I just leave it at that.
I also think a comparison I can make is like modern day journalism. Mm-hmm. Whereas modern day journalism really isn't journalism most of the time. It's sensationalism. The New York Post is not a newspaper. It's a sensationalistic magazine. Right. It's big headlines. It's catchy phrases. It's freaking it's grab your attention type stuff. Their whole reason is, I mean, it's a product of the environment. Unfortunately, they have to do that, because if they don't try to grab your attention,
right,
it's clickbait. They're not going to sell the advertising space. They're not going to make any money. So I think that art, in a sense, with the digitalization of it, is one side had to compete with faster, more consumable mediums like the internet and everything else. So they then, process of evolution, it was like, well, how do we take this up a notch? Well. It's one thing to draw it in hand. I can do it faster on a computer. I can make it pop more. I can add effects. I can do this. I can do certain techniques that are just easier, faster, and more, in your face on a digital medium. But if you look at the history of art, you take away the televisions and the computers and all of that. Mm-hmm. This is how art was distributed. Yeah. So it wasn't so much the focus of the subject, but what the subject within the art represented. There was so much more to be said in a picture because you couldn't find those statements somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So I think it gave more power to the artist too, because there were certain things that you can say through art that you can't say directly through words. Right. So I think that's cool that you're kind of staying true, because it's there's more weight to the art than just a digitalization or just our abstract way of looking at one subject. You're taking the medium and you're saying there's a layer below it that you should explore. That's cool. And like, I think that it's been lost in modern day work. A lot of modern day work, at least the stuff that gets attention, is stuff that is designed as almost clickbait. It's designed to grab your attention quickly, make you pay for it, and then move along. Or, find a way to monetize the art, which is great. Everyone should be able to make money on their art. But when one becomes more important than the other, I think it takes away. This, especially the black, do you normally do black and white, or do you
normally
color?
do black and white?
It flattens it, because I guess it's cliche. You have to look at it in black and white and say, well, there's a whole spectrum of gray. Colors can also be distracting. It's also, you make something colorful, you grab somebody's attention. Right. This, you kind of say, this is just it's very cool. It's very cool, and I think it's to be commended that you're holding on to a lot of the roots of this particular art form. It's cool. It's really cool.
Another thing about sticking to my guns and keeping things by hand, I think, and it connects all the arts in this fashion of, I do a piece of art, it exists, it's in that moment. That's what happened in that moment. Mm-hmm. It's a snapshot of time. Yeah. There's an original piece, and maybe I leaned on something weird. Maybe I put a fingerprint somewhere, or I put something where I didn't mean it to go, and you, especially with ink more so, you have to react right in that moment.
Right.
I'm working with black ink on a white piece of paper. I can't paint over it.
No.
That's it. I've tried whiteout. It's always going to be there. Like, it never. So I have to be precise in that moment. So it trains you. And if you were doing a live performance of music or acting.
Exactly.
You have to be in that moment. And I like that. I like that tight wire walk. And then if a mistake does happen, okay, now what? How maybe the art will get better. And that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought I've screwed up big time. And then you put it away for a while. But you don't throw it away. I just put it aside and come back to it. Or even in that moment, say, all right, I screwed up. Now what? Okay, how can I weave this into what I'm doing?
So is that like when, like, so my question is, so how long have you been drawing and painting and all that? Like, how long have you been in this style of art? So a long time, but also not that long. So I went, to give you just a little bit of a background, I went to Ep.61, which had something they called the Magnet Program on Staten Island, which was an arts program that you had to apply for visual art, music, and drama. So I drew a lot as a kid. I was an only child to a single mom. I had tons of time to myself. And my imagination was just, whew. Oh, yeah.
So I drew all the time as a kid, and my mother pushed me to go into the school. I get in. The teacher was so hard on us.
Really?
Unbelievably. And it felt personal at the time.
Understandable.
She could have seen something in me and maybe pushed me harder. I don't know. But she was hard enough on us or me that I didn't want to know nothing about art after that. So all through high school, into college, I didn't pick up so much as a pencil. I got into other things.
Right.
I kept creative and busy, but never with art.
Right.
I started ESU as a history major. I hate it. I want to drop out. I cut out of school one day and drive to Narrowsburg to my mother's house and just tell her, I said, look, I'm not having fun. I hate it. I'm not vibing with any of my peers. I was just a lonely little artist that didn't know it. And my mother said, look, let's make a deal here. She goes, you don't like history? Cool. But why don't you try to go back to art and see if you like it. And then if you don't like it, then we'll talk about
That's
leaving
cool,
college.
though, that she like tried to push you there, though.
Right. And that, to me, was a complete crossroads to me. And I said, we made that deal. And I said, you know what? Okay. Because I was starting to get interested in things again. And that's pretty much started me off. And I went to ESU and switched to art and poof.
So have you always kind of done this style, or is that something that you kind of evolved into being at ESU, or where did this style come from?
It came from my interests, which were very separate from art to begin with. So I had a proclivity to the 20s and 30s into the 40s. I was more inspired by music, so like here's two musicians right here that I drew.
Oh wait, you did these?
Yeah, both of those.
You did that?
Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, that's amazing as well. But that isn't. Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
So that one there is Adelaide Hall. She was a jazz singer. She sang a lot with Duke Ellington, and in her hair that's an actual picture. So it's somewhat of a collage.
Okay.
Of two dancers of that time period.
But just the way you put it together, and again, that's why I like the black and white, because it draws your focus to certain, it's like I said, I think a lot of appreciation can get lost on color because it's such a whole different world in its own. And there's a billion, trillion, whatever amount of colors, and colors can be interpreted differently to different people. Black and white and grayscale, there's only so much you can do with that particular aspect of the picture. You have to look at a little bit more than just the colors. It fades away.
Right.
And what you did with just the way, her hair, but it seems like it belongs. It's a cool, like, it adds so much depth, and it gives it this cool, like, little two-tone within one picture. Like, it's really, like, I think that's awesome. I really like that.
And to elaborate the point of mistakes yielding something amazing, a few pieces before that. So now I do collage too, and I'll jump back and forth. And a couple of pieces before that, I was doing a portrait, and I screwed up the hair. And it was like I don't remember how I screwed it up, but I screwed it up. And I was sitting there, and I was all pissed off because in my first reaction is the art's ruined now. It's ruined, done. Yep. Spent all this time, and now it's going in the trash. So at first, I thought, okay, maybe I could just redraw the hair, and I'll put it on there. So I took the portrait and I cut the hair off. It was like a semi-profile of a woman. So I cut the hair out, and I'm looking at what I had cut out, and I took the picture with the piece cut out, and I had just thrown it to the side. Okay? And I'm looking at the hair. I'm like, okay, this was my mistake. This is what I need to do different. And I had thrown the picture on top of a pile of things I had cut out for a collage. And I see an image of like a cityscape in her hair. And I'm like, wait a minute, that looks kind of cool. And maybe if I move it and that's where that came from, and it evolved. And that's like for that piece.
That's awesome. I
then started picking applicable pictures to put in the hair.
Right.
So that's where that little style came from.
And it's funny because, like, I don't have kids. I don't have any plans of having kids anytime soon.
Right.
But I think it's a cool thing with artists, because also I meet a lot of artists I almost feel like artists wait longer than just your standard 9 to 5 or regular, how do I say this? Like, people who aren't, like, creatives in general, like, right. Musicians and painters and art, and, like, people, they don't have, do you have kids?
No.
Okay. My point, and how old are you, by the way?
I'm 31.
Oh, okay. All right. When's your birthday?
February 16th.
All right. February 26th.
Okay.
And I'm 32, so very, very close.
Yeah.
But I think we wait because I think there's almost something parental in art. And what I mean by that is it's, as any parent, trust me, mine are a perfect example of this, they have an expectation for what their kid's going to be. You're like, oh, my kid, he's going to be great. They download all their messed up, like, ideas of, like, and they have their expectations of their kids. And then they realize over time that just because they have those expectations doesn't mean that's how their kid's going to turn out.
Right.
They have to kind of sit back and go, like, it's a beautiful mistake. It's a beautiful, like, chaos of possibility that I think kids are. And I think there's something parental in artistry because, perfect example, you thought it was going to turn out one way. Right. And when you realized, I made a mistake, you tried to correct that mistake. Then it's almost like you gave the art a moment and you looked at it differently. Bob Ross would say, what a happy little mistake.
Happy accidents.
Happy accident. You gave the art a chance to almost grow on. It's crazy. That to me is one of the craziest things about music, about visual arts, about anything like that, is they take on for something that is, I guess, biologically speaking, inorganic, and something that is, but something that is not alive, to take on such a life of its own, that they can grow over to something that, like, that is stagnant in time. Like you said, it is a piece of time of that moment. It will continue to evolve over time. The interpretation, the way you look at it, the way you'll discover your lines. You'll notice it in different ways that you hadn't, you as the artist and other people as the viewer. It's never changing.
Right.
But it's constantly evolving. It's crazy how something that is not alive, something that is not, like, changing in the way that life changes, is still constantly changing, constantly evolving. It's just, it's a cool little, like, abstract way of art, and I think it's almost parental because we have our expectations. I write a song, I think it's going to go a certain place.
Right.
I have a song called Devil with a Halo. Actually, no, I'll even take it a step further. I I have a song called Rock Nation.
Okay.
Which Rock Nation was originally, I had taken a couple different like pieces from just random pieces of songs that like never actually made it into anything on their own, and I kind of put them together. And I was like, oh, this is the idea that I want to go with it. And originally the song was going to be just, you know, a typical like late 80s song about some woman with big hair and high heels that's strutting down the road, and you want that woman to come. And it evolved. It got almost dark. And the song itself became, how could I glorify all the horrible things that like rock music is? Like, basically I tried to, through the energy of the song, through the words that I chose, through the way that I kind of wrote it, the song itself, it like like a lot of the things in the song are not things that people should aspire to do. One of the lines is the broken bottles in the backseat match the lies that I tell myself. Like, realistically, that's not a characteristic that somebody wants to be able to describe their life about. You don't want broken bottles in your backseat and talk about we tell you, first of all, it implies alcohol to some extent in a car, which is obviously I have a history with, but like it also like it just, you know, the lies that I tell myself. Well, things that you're not. The whole song is riddled with lines like that. But I wanted to glorify it. I wanted to make it like I just wanted it like basically paint with a big red marker, like something that is just like it was just. And the idea was, the song had an idea. It had a starting point. I had a concept of where I wanted to go.
Right.
It never got there. It took a completely different route. It ended up something completely different. It's one of my favorite songs to play because it's such a gritty, energetic rock song. It would have never gone there if things had gone according to plan.
Right.
Same deal as what you're talking about with your picture. It's almost, like I said, parental in the fact that like just because we have a plan for our little artistic children doesn't mean it's going to get there, but it's fun to watch it grow, and it grows by your own hands, by your own brain, by your own actual actions. And it's one of the fun things that I think that like, obviously I think parents will be the first ones to tell you don't know what it's like to raise a kid, and be like, I get it, and I admit that, but also I think artists can agree with that statement that it is something like nurturing and parental and something like instinctual.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm sure it's not the same, and again, neither one of us have kids, but when a new piece of my art has to go to a gallery for 4 months, I don't know, like I feel I feel that like, oh, you're going off into the world.
Exactly. You know? Like I completely understand. Completely understand. Like, but I think it also is why I think artists become so connected to their music or their art in that general, whether it's what you do or what I do, is because it is something we create. It's pieces of us in some fashion. It you know, obviously you don't know those people.
No.
But the point is they look the way they do. That piano is the way it is. The lines, the creativity, the expressions on their face. It's all of that is because of your touch and your strokes and your everything, from the mood, from your energy level, like the fatigue of your hand, everything boils down to what shaped that. It's like you said, it's a moment of time that cannot be replicated. You can copy that picture all you want. You're never going to copy that moment in time. And I think that because of that, that's why you get that feeling. You send that picture away and you're like, because no matter how much that hits somebody, or if somebody might, you know, look at this picture and they'll go, oh my God, it reminds me of my mother somehow. Like, and there's such an emotional connection. They'll never have that connection that you did as the creator.
Right.
Like me with my song Time for a Change. It was one of the reasons I stopped going to that studio. Because that song has evolved on its own. When I started playing for the band, it became very upbeat. It became which was funny because the song would be very upbeat and sped up. We would go into Every Rose Has a Thorn by Poison. Okay. And also keep the upbeat, sped up tempo. And people would be like dancing to Every Rose Has a Thorn, where that's kind of a sad song. It's like a ballad from the 80s. Right. But people were like, at the end, be like, that's actually kind of a cool way to doing that song. Like, I'm like, normally people are very happy listening to that song. It's not a happy emotion. But people are dancing to it now. But Time for a Change was actually written as a very stripped down, emotionally driven, just freaking very simple song, because the idea behind it was that was my first exploration in music to deal with me. Was this time for a change. And like the lyrics, once you understand the concept behind the song, the lyrics become a little more straightforward. But obviously without knowing that background, that's why there were so many different interpretations, because they were fairly direct, but without having a starting point, anybody could place any starting point there and just run with it, which is what I loved it. But it was something so simple, so personal. It could be interpreted in a million different ways, but nobody could have that ownership of time that I, as the creator, did. Same with you, with the art that you make. People can feel so connected and so enthralled and so feel something for something you create, but they'll never know that almost parental connection as the person who actually created it. And I think that's kind of special, and it's individual for each artist. But I think that's kind of a special thing about the art.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I have it so bad that I would rather give my art to somebody I like than sell it to somebody I don't.
It's how I am with writing music. That's why I have such a hard time when people are like, oh, you should be a songwriter. I'm like, I don't, because somebody else, like, and maybe it's a little, I chalk it up to being selfish, but it's also, it's like you said, I'd rather see it go to somebody I know who maybe has history with it or understands my feelings towards it. Like, but on the flip side, that's why, I don't write songs. I like twice in my life, I've written songs for people. Well, once I wrote a song for someone. Okay. I've never played that song since, because that relationship went awry. There was another song that I wrote, which I tweaked a little bit to be for somebody, and I loved it. It was a song called Summertime Fine. Okay. It was a cool little, like, upbeat, lighthearted, little jammy song. And I had kind of switched, I had changed the green eyes to blue eyes in the song, and I'll never change it back because that's just the direction they took. But it was one of my favorite songs to play, and I couldn't play it for 3 years because me and that particular individual were no longer involved, and it became such a connective point. Like, I could play a song at an open mic and look, and I would see the blue eyes that were now in the song, and it was too much. So I took a step away from dedicating and making art for somebody, and I just let people claim it as they'd like, and kept it personal, maybe being a little selfish with it, but it was almost like a boundary that I had to place on my art, because my connection to what I create was so strong that to attach another person to it is almost too intimate. So, but just me.
Yeah, and you, as we go, you learn yourself.
Agreed.
You learn, okay, I know myself, and this is how this is gonna go. The way I work now is I will leave room for anything. So, I recently did Portrait of Richard Pryor, the comedian. Okay, it's a portrait. I want it obviously to look like him, so those are the rules. I will leave moments, and to me, it always goes back to jazz, old jazz specifically, where you have your head arrangement. This needs to be drawn or played this way.
Right.
But then here's some room here for improvisation.
Right.
Where I can just let myself be free. And that has been so much fun, is to be able to feed that part of me, that workaholic who wants to get it right and wants to be precise, but also let there be room for total freedom.
Now, with that freedom, does it give you a little bit of almost a relaxation as far as your connection to the art, knowing that it was in the moment and you can't have it back, or does it actually enhance your connection to the art because it's so moment specific?
It definitely enhances it.
It makes sense. It definitely makes sense.
More than the best way to explain it in my terms, I guess, would be drawing. If I'm doing a portrait and I'm getting the face right, that's technical. That's concentrated, technical, Whereas when that gate opens and those horses run,
Right.
and I'm just free-forming it, that is stressful in the moment.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because you don't want to screw up, but it's way more connecting because it's just a feel thing. Like, I just feel closer to it because I know there's less in between me and the art when it's completely free than when I'm being technical.
Right. Well, I think it becomes less static and more emotional.
Yeah.
And, like, I was always, because I came from a very country or classic rock, they're very standard structures of songs. Like, it's basically, there's a lot of 4-chord or, like, 8-chord, different progressions where you bounce back and forth. Mm-hmm. It's not a lot of creativity, but the creativity tends to come with certain, like, lyrical phrasing and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Or it's more in the impact of the emotion. It's a lot more like, well, I'm not going to wow you with my words or my guitar playing, but I want to play it in which it forces, like, an emotion on you. But one thing I learned to appreciate was Brian Roeder, my guitarist, Kenny to some extent, but Brian was the one I started the band with, and Brian came from a very different, more musical background with it, whereas he was a Grateful Dead fan. He was the Allman Brothers, Fish, a lot of this jam band that was very interpretive and very less structured. I've seen Dark Star Orchestra play, I forget how many times now because of him, where a lot of it is, we have, like you said, a starting point, and then they take a step back and they free themselves from, like, the discipline of this is what we have to do, and they just say, where's it going to go? And I'm going to let it go there. And it kind of playing with them and allowing myself to, like, it kind of worked because I was able to influence them to have a good structured starting point, and then to be able to just have some kind of a foundation to build upon. And then we could literally let the chips fall wherever they went during the song, during the show. That's why we've never used set lists. People have asked, oh, well, what songs are on your set list? I'm like, I have no idea. What do you mean? You played 3 shows this weekend. What'd you get? I'm like, I don't know. We know what songs we can play. We know what songs we have the ability to try. And occasionally we'll if somebody throws something at us, we'll give it a shot. But it was always based on how the crowd reacts, how we're feeling, how we're vibing off each other. It was always in the moment, and it was always emotionally driven. And where, like you said, I mean, there were shows that, like, it was very stressful because you have no idea what's going to happen. You're like, I'm just kind of flying. But then after that moment passes, I was explaining it to Michaela, because now that I moved away, I've been telling all of them for years. Like, the way you get better is to go play with other artists, or go to open mics, or do this. Talk to other people from other, like, artistic mediums, and it gets you better. It expands your brain. It makes you more creative. So Michaela finally went out, and she actually, a band found her. Very well-established band. They've been together for like 30 years. They were looking for a new lead singer. It's called Toolshed Jack. And she was like, oh my God, it's so nerve-wracking. I'm like, yeah, but you know what's going to happen is eventually the conscious, like, structure of what you're doing is going to go away, and you're going to go on autopilot. And I told her, I said, and it's a little bit more when it's completely destructured, like how we've done with the Bandana Brothers, where it's kind of like Brian's going to do his thing, Kenny's going to do his thing, Tyrone's going to do his thing, I'll probably try to sing a couple lines here, and then I'll do my thing on my acoustic, and then somehow, it's one of the magics of music. I think it's also within, like, visual mediums too, is like somehow you'll just, whether it's the middle or the end of it, you'll complete a sequence in your drawing, or I'll complete a sequence in the song or whatever, and you just hit that line, you hit that note, you find that pause point, and it's like that's where that was supposed to go. I had no idea. I couldn't have planned it. There's a billion different options where this could have gone, but that's where it was supposed to go. It's a weird, like, it's a weird feeling of it being perfect, even though perfect is impossible. Yeah. It's like, and that's, I was trying to tell Michaela, I says it's a little different when you have jam band elements involved, but, like, just from a music perspective, you're eventually going to kick on autopilot, and no one's really going to be, like, consciously doing the same thing. You're all going to be doing it because just feels good. And I said, you're going to all just somehow end up on the same note. And as soon as you hit it, you're going to take a deep mental breath and just smile, because like you had no idea that you were going to arrive exactly where you were supposed to arrive.
Right.
And I think that's a cool thing, like I said, that to be shared between the mediums is like those happy mistakes or whatever. Like it's the end result was inevitable. It makes perfect sense in the end. It's where that belonged to be. It could have never done anything else. But it's an impossible, unfathomable concept to go, how is that possible? How could it have ended so uniquely, so perfect? And like, even something that isn't like, well, again, that's not what that was supposed to be. But look at it. That's exactly what that was supposed to be. It's a cool mind fuck.
It feels like bigger than us.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I'm not a religious person. I'm not a spiritual. I think you're big old circle of life from Lion King. Like, we live, we become worm food, we're going to feed the cows, and the next generation's going to have a burger. Right. But it does give it a cosmic feel. It does make it seem bigger, because as artists, we don't know why we do the things we do. We just know that it makes us feel complete. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel connected to something. And when you reach a point in any work of art, that you can take a step back and like see just where the chips fell, how everything aligned. Yeah. It's weird. It makes everything make sense, but nothing at all.
So where can folks find you and your work?
They can find me on Facebook. Obviously, is always the easiest, because everybody and their mother has one. Right. And the older we get, the more mothers have one. But it's Jaycie Cuprill Music. My first name is spelled Jaycie. Jaycie Cuprill Music. On Instagram, it's just Jaycie Music. And those are pretty much the two biggest spots to find stuff. The Instagram I use to post little clips and little videos. Facebook is usually more of a promotional tool, get all the shows out there, that whole thing. I'm very interactive with people on the Instagram account. But yeah, that's usually where I do it. I'm still working on the whole SoundCloud and all that stuff. Like I said, I have music recorded. I'm just holding off until I'm comfortable releasing it. But yeah, so like the Facebook, the Instagram, the usual stuff.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this show. It was great talking with you, and getting to know a little bit what you're about.
And I can't thank you enough for having me out. Like I said, it's awesome that you're doing this. It's awesome that you're providing just artists in general a great platform to sit down and discuss the music, but also like expand upon it. That's the cool thing I think about what you're doing, is you're allowing the conversation to drift off into other areas, and that's cool. I think it makes it relatable. I think it makes it explorative, and I think it's a great example of how a creative medium works. So I thank you very much for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, I feel like no matter what form of arts people may be in terms of the process, we have so much in common.
I agree.
With the creative process, and by talking about it, that's how we figure it out.
And I think that's also how we learn. Like the different creative disciplines and everything, like just because something's more visual than it is auditory, or like how I said, like the reason I play is because it's more of a physical thing. Music is perceived as just an audio-based medium, whereas there's so much more to it. Yeah. Same with a painting or poetry or any kind of the influences and the way it influences other people bleeds through. So I think it's a good thing to be able to have a space where artists of all types can kind of share in that creativity. So, like I said, again, I think this is awesome that you're doing this, and I'm really happy that I could be a part of it.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. All right, folks, was that an episode or was that an episode? I hope you enjoyed it, because I definitely did. You could find more of Jaycie online at Jaycie Cuprill Music. She's always playing different places. She does a lot of shows. She's a very productive musician, and I think it's definitely worth it for you to check her out. I've seen her perform live, and it's fantastic. There's going to be a lot more exciting episodes coming up. We've got rappers, comedians, other artists. I got big plans for the future of the show going forward. It's going to be a great summer for Planet Shivers. We're going to ease you right into fall, nice and easy. In the meantime, you could find more episodes of Planet Shivers on all major podcast platforms and YouTube. You could find what I'm up to on Facebook, Albert Shivers, or on Instagram at Albert Shivers, Patreon, Albert Shivers Artist, and I am accepting tips for the podcast and for the art on Cash App, $Shivers Art. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of somebody else, and I'll talk to you on the next podcast.